A 6-year-old girl stands in a California courtroom, clutching a small stuffed toy. Her hands shake as she points across the room. Her voice is quiet, almost lost in the air. She says he threw her into the car. She says when her friend was inside, she looked back at her. She thinks she said help, or something like that. 3 years earlier, this same child had witnessed something no child should ever see: the sudden disappearance of her best friend in broad daylight. What she remembered would later reopen a case many believed was already lost. What she did not know was that the man who took her friend had already slipped through the system once before. This is the story of Samantha Runnion, a case that would shake California, a case that would change how America thinks about child safety. It is a story built on the bravery of a young witness, the strength of a grieving family, and DNA evidence so rare it was once believed to be almost impossible to find. It is a case that shows how the system can fail more than once before justice finally arrives. Before we continue, if this is your first time here, welcome. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Feel free to share in the comments. And to our amazing community, especially those of you who return week after week to seek justice and raise awareness, you are the reason this channel exists. Every share, every comment, every like is a voice for the voiceless. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because every case we cover is a chance to remember, to reflect, and to honor lives gone too soon. Monday evening, July 15, 2002. Stanton, California. It is around 6:30 p.m. The sun is still up. Families are home. Dinner is being made. 5-year-old Samantha Brie Runnion sits on a low concrete wall with her friend, 6-year-old Sarah. They are playing near a row of garages inside the Smoke Tree condominium complex in Orange County. Later, residents will describe this spot as a blind area. A narrow road. No nearby parking. No windows looking down. No adults watching. It is the kind of place children are usually warned to avoid. But it is summer. It is warm. And the girls are focused on their game. Samantha is wearing a white blouse, red checkered shorts, and pink sandals decorated with small green frogs. In just 11 days, she will turn 6 years old. Her mother has already bought most of her birthday gifts. Building toys. A puzzle. A small dress for one of her dolls. Presents that will never be opened. A light green Ford Thunderbird slowly drives past the girls. Then it stops. It turns around. It comes back and pulls up beside them. Behind the wheel is a 27-year-old man named Alejandro Avila. He has slicked back black hair, a thin mustache, and dark eyes. He leans out of the window and asks a simple question. Have you seen a little puppy? The girls look up. A puppy? He explains. Samantha bends down and gestures with her hands, asking how big the dog is. That is the moment everything changes. Avila suddenly reaches out and grabs Samantha. She screams. She yells for help. She tells her friend to tell her grandmother. She kicks and fights, dragging her feet against the pavement, trying to pull away. But she is only 5 years old. She weighs barely 40 pounds. He forces her into the car. The door slams shut. Tires screech. The green Thunderbird speeds away. For a few seconds, Sarah stands frozen. Then she runs. She runs to her mother. She runs for help. Within 15 minutes, sheriff's deputies arrive. Helicopters lift into the sky. Searchlights sweep across rooftops and streets. But Samantha is already gone. Her mother is at work in Long Beach. She chose this apartment complex because it felt safe. Family-friendly. A place where neighbors talked and children played outside without fear. Samantha's grandmother had been watching her and was just around the corner inside the apartment. She saw nothing. Now, one of the largest searches Southern California has ever seen begins. Thousands of tips pour in. Federal agents flood into Orange County. News spreads across the country. This was not a quiet disappearance. This happened in daylight. During rush hour. Inside a residential complex. Parents everywhere begin to look at their neighborhoods differently. Police release Samantha's description. Her clothes. Her hair and eyes. And they have something else. Sarah, only 6 years old, is able to describe the man and his car in remarkable detail. His age range, his hair, his mustache, his shirt, the color and style of the vehicle. A sketch artist works with her. Later, he will say she was one of the strongest child witnesses he has ever seen. The sketch is uncannily accurate. Within hours, it is everywhere. Television screens, newspapers, flyers. Officers across Southern California begin stopping any vehicle that looks even remotely similar. Volunteers join the search. Strangers who have never met Samantha's family go out looking. Everyone holds on to hope. But investigators know the truth. In cases like this, time is everything. And time is already slipping away. Sheriff's officials say something important early on. Because Samantha was found less than 24 hours after she was taken, they believe strong forensic evidence will be recovered. Evidence from the scene. Evidence from her body. Evidence that could point directly to the person responsible. They're right. Investigators will later say the suspect left behind an overwhelming amount of physical evidence. He did not act carefully. He made mistakes. Many of them. But before any of that can matter, police need a name. They need to match the face in the sketch to a real person. That break comes from someone unexpected. A woman named Tammy sees the composite drawing and feels a jolt of recognition. She contacts police and gives them a name. Alejandro Avila. He is 27 years old. 6'2". About 195 pounds. Hispanic. Black hair. Thin mustache. Brown eyes. The resemblance to the sketch is striking. Everything lines up. But as detectives dig deeper, they realize this is not just a suspect. This is someone who should have raised alarms long before Samantha was taken. Alejandro Avila has a past. 18 months earlier, he had stood trial accused of harming 2 young girls. The case went to a jury. He was found not guilty. The jury did not believe the children. They believed him. Then investigators learned something chilling. One of those girls lived at the same condominium complex as Samantha, just 2 doors away. A disturbing question forms almost immediately. Was Avila familiar with the complex? Had he been there before? Was he looking for that child when he found Samantha instead? Later, Avila's former girlfriend will say she believes exactly that. She will say she thinks he went there looking for her daughter, that he was fixated. But for now, police focus on facts. And the facts are piling up fast. On July 19th, 4 days after Samantha was taken, deputies arrest Alejandro Avila at his mother's apartment in Lake Elsinore. He has been staying with family nearby. The location is only about 10 miles from where Samantha was found. After a long interrogation and multiple search warrants, Avila is taken into custody on suspicion of kidnapping and murder. The massive search ends. But the real work is just beginning. Detectives begin reconstructing his movements on July 15th, minute by minute. What they uncover is deeply incriminating. At 5:18 that evening, Avila withdraws cash from an ATM in Lake Elsinore. There is video. There are bank records. That night, he was supposed to be home preparing dinner for his family. Instead, he left in his car. Surveillance cameras and phone records trace his path across Southern California. At 7:22 p.m., he stops at a gas station in San Clemente. Cameras capture him wearing athletic shoes. Later, investigators will say those shoes match impressions found near the scene. After 9 o'clock, he checks into a hotel in Temecula. To confirm everything, investigators retrace the entire route 1 week later. Same day, same times, same stops. The bank, the condominium complex, the remote area where Samantha was found, the gas stations, the hotel. They drive more than 200 miles. The total time fits perfectly. When they reach the condominium complex, it is just after 6:15 in the evening, right when Samantha was taken. Then more details surface. Avila's sister tells detectives he knows the area where Samantha was found. She remembers going there with him once to watch a meteor shower. He did not stumble onto that location. He knew it. The day after the abduction, Avila tells his sister he spent the day at the beach. She notices a fresh scratch on his leg. He says it came from a baby gate in the apartment. But when she looks at the gate, it is smooth plastic. Nothing sharp. Nothing that could cause that kind of mark. To her, it looks more like a scratch from someone fighting back. Search warrants follow. His apartment. His car. His family's home. What police find is devastating. The car matches the description. A light green Ford Thunderbird. The tires match marks found near the scene. Inside the vehicle, investigators recover Samantha's DNA. On the door handle. On the seatbelt. On the center console. The odds of that DNA belonging to anyone else are almost impossible. 1 in a trillion. Under Samantha's fingernails, they find Avila's DNA. Evidence of a struggle. Evidence that she fought. The odds of that match being wrong are hundreds of millions to 1. There are also shoe impressions. Athletic shoes. Size 12. At Avila's residence, police find an empty shoebox. Same brand. Same size. Store records confirm he bought those shoes months earlier. Surveillance footage shows him wearing similar shoes the night of the crime. The shoes themselves are never found. Then investigators examine a home computer Avila had access to. What they recover is some of the most disturbing evidence in the case. Deleted files showing a fixation on children. Written material printed just hours before Samantha was taken. Online conversations where the user openly discussed harmful thoughts about young girls. The computer belonged to a family member, but she tells the court she never searched for anything like that. Their mother did not know how to use the internet. Avila did. Regularly. This is not accidental behavior. This is not impulsive. To investigators, it shows planning. It shows intent. And it shows that what happened to Samantha was not random. What makes this case even harder to accept is this simple truth. None of this had to happen. 18 months before Samantha was taken, the system had a clear chance to stop Alejandro Avila. And it failed. To understand how, we have to go back to January of 2001. To a courtroom in Riverside County. To a trial that quietly set the stage for everything that followed. Alejandro Avila sits at the defense table, facing serious charges. He is accused of harming 2 young girls. Both are 9 years old. One is Catherine, the daughter of his former girlfriend. The other is Alexis, Catherine's cousin. Over 5 days, the jury hears testimony that is difficult to listen to. Both girls describe repeated abuse that happened while Avila was supposed to be watching them. Catherine says it began when she was only 7. She describes how he touched her again and again over the course of a year. She describes threats. She describes fear. She describes being told to stay quiet or her mother would be hurt. Alexis tells a similar story. Different details, same pattern. Same age. Same setting. Same power imbalance. But there is a problem for the prosecution. There is no physical evidence. No DNA. No medical proof. Only the words of 2 frightened children. The defense attorney focuses on that. He points out small differences in their statements. Numbers that change. Details that are not always the same. To an adult, those differences can sound like uncertainty. After deliberating for a day and a half, the jury returns with its verdict. Not guilty. Alejandro Avila walks out of the courtroom a free man. Later, one juror will explain their reasoning. The girls, they say, were not consistent. Asked how many times it happened, the answers changed. 3 times. 5 times. 50 times. To the jury, that created doubt. But trauma does not work like a calendar. Children do not count incidents. They do not keep timelines. They remember fear. They remember pain. They remember trying to survive. The jury does not see it that way. They see doubt. And they acquit. Even the defense attorney will later admit he was surprised by the verdict. The prosecutor is devastated. He believed the girls. He did everything he could. And he will carry that loss with him. For Catherine and Alexis, the verdict is more than disappointing. It is crushing. They spoke up. They told the truth. And adults did not believe them. Avila's mother is relieved. She never believed the accusations. She says her son is gentle. Good with children. Incapable of harm. Catherine's mother feels the opposite. She knows what happened to her child. And she is terrified of what might come next. She tells people the jury made a terrible mistake. She says it is only a matter of time before he hurts someone again. She has no idea how close that time really is. After the acquittal, Avila returns to his life. He moves in with his sister. He has access to a family computer. On the surface, everything looks normal. But something inside him has changed. The trial teaches him two dangerous lessons. First, that children can be powerful witnesses. Second, that if there is no witness left to speak, there is no case. One night, he is watching television with his sister. A movie is playing about a legal principle that says a person cannot be tried twice for the same crime. During the movie, Avila makes a comment that sends a chill through her. He says he could do whatever he wanted to a child and never be charged for it again. His sister remembers those words. She will repeat them in court years later. And they will matter. Because prosecutors will argue that Samantha was not only taken because of desire. She was taken because she was a witness. He had learned from his past. He was not going to take that risk again. And there is more. During the months after the 2001 trial, another young girl comes forward. She says Avila harmed her too. She says he threatened her. She was terrified. She stayed silent. It is only after Samantha's case explodes across the news that she finally speaks. Her testimony will later be allowed in court. Not to prove what happened to Samantha, but to show a pattern. To show who Alejandro Avila really is. Multiple girls. Similar ages. Similar stories. Similar threats. By the summer of 2002, Avila believes he understands the system. He believes he knows how to beat it. So when he sees two small girls playing alone in a hidden corner of a condominium complex, he makes a choice. And that choice leads directly to Samantha. Now, investigators return their focus to the present, to the mountain of evidence building against him. Because while his past explains his actions, it is the physical evidence that will ultimately bring him to justice. When the sheriff speaks after Avila's arrest, his emotion is visible. This case has shaken everyone. Relief mixes with anger. Relief that a suspect is in custody. Anger that he ever walked free in the first place. Samantha's mother will later say what many are thinking. That the system failed. That children were not believed. And that the cost of that failure was the life of a 5-year-old girl. In July 2002, the focus is on building a case so strong that Alejandro Avila cannot escape justice. On July 23, he is formally charged with first-degree murder, kidnapping, and 2 counts of lewd and lascivious acts on a child under 14, with special circumstances that make him eligible for the death penalty. The community is in mourning. A memorial forms outside the Smoke Tree condominium complex with flowers, teddy bears, cards, and personal tributes. Around 250 people gather for a vigil, holding hands, praying, grieving, some crying, some angry, all shattered. Aaron Renas speaks through tears, urging everyone to protect their children and to watch over all children, to trust their instincts. Samantha's father, Derek, pleads with the community to keep children safe, expressing his unending grief. As the investigation unfolds, more about Avila's behavior comes to light. A former roommate reveals disturbing images on a computer in Avila's old bedroom depicting child sexual abuse. Another witness describes how Avila asked his ex-girlfriend to dress in clothing that made her appear younger. These details show a long-standing, persistent attraction to children and a clear pattern of escalating abuse. Catherine was abused starting at age 7, Alexis experienced similar abuse, Kara was threatened, and then Samantha was abducted and murdered. Experts recognize this pattern immediately. Avila would not have stopped if left unchecked. FBI agent Richard Garcia was right about Samantha's body being left as a challenge. Avila made critical mistakes. He left DNA everywhere, was caught on surveillance cameras, and cell phone records traced his movements. His computer contained evidence of his intentions. After previously escaping justice, he grew careless, a false sense of invincibility giving him confidence. That carelessness would lead to his downfall. In 2002, California lacked an Amber Alert system. There was no way to instantly notify thousands of drivers about Samantha's abduction, no freeway billboards, no alerts to phones. Thousands of drivers during rush hour might have seen the green Thunderbird, called police, and possibly saved Samantha. But the system didn't exist, and she died. Her death, however, sparked change. Governor Gray Davis, horrified, contacted Aaron Runnion within 2 weeks to ensure Amber Alert would be implemented in California. On August 24, 2002, Assembly Bill 415 is signed into law. California becomes the 14th state with an Amber Alert system. Alerts display on freeway signs and interrupt radio and TV programming, including descriptions of the child, the abductor, and any vehicle involved. Samantha's case becomes the catalyst. Within 2 weeks, the Amber Alert helps save 2 kidnapped teenage girls, proving the system's life-saving power. Hundreds of children have been protected because of Samantha. For Aaron Runnion, her daughter's death becomes purpose. In September 2002, she founds the Joyful Child Foundation, teaching children to recognize danger, trust instincts, say no, and escape harm. She trains teachers and law enforcement, advocates for stronger child protection laws, and transforms grief into action. Meanwhile, preparation for the trial continues. The prosecution assembles overwhelming evidence, DNA proving contact, computer files showing premeditation, testimony from multiple victims demonstrating a pattern, surveillance footage, and cell phone records confirming timeline and opportunity. They know juries can be unpredictable, but this time, justice must be delivered. They know that in 2001, a jury looked at evidence of child molestation and voted to acquit. They are determined not to let that happen again. The decision is made to seek the death penalty. District Attorney Tony Recalcus announces it publicly, promising that anyone committing such a crime in Orange County will either die in prison of natural causes or be executed. The statement reflects the community's anger and demand for justice. Before the trial, there must be a funeral. On July 24, 2002, at the Crystal Cathedral in Garden Grove, around 3,500 mourners gathered just 2 days after what would have been Samantha's 6th birthday. Instead of celebrating, her family is burying her. Reverend Robert Schuller officiates. Samantha's artwork is displayed, music from Peter Pan plays, and one of her drawings reads, "Be brave." Those words later become central to Aaron Runnion's advocacy. Samantha's small brown coffin, covered in pink roses, holds her remains. Aaron speaks to the crowd, her voice breaking, acknowledging the grief but also the love and integrity surrounding her daughter's life. Derek struggles to speak, overwhelmed by loss and guilt for not protecting her. The memorial outside the Smoke Tree Complex continues to grow, becoming a place of pilgrimage. Meanwhile, the investigation presses on. On March 14, 2005, nearly 3 years after Samantha's murder, jury selection begins for Alejandro Avila's trial in Orange County Superior Court before Judge William R. Froberg. Deputy District Attorney David Brent leads the prosecution, and Philip L. Zalewski defends Avila. A critical pretrial ruling allows the prosecution to introduce evidence of Avila's 2001 acquittal and testimony from Catherine, Alexis, and Cara. The defense objects, citing double jeopardy and prejudice, but the judge rules in favor of the prosecution. The jury will see a pattern of abuse, proving this was not an isolated incident. The trial begins. 8 men and 4 women sit in judgment. The prosecution's opening statement is methodical, laying out DNA evidence, computer files, witness testimony, and prior accusations. Brent explains how Avila escalated from molestation to murder, killing Samantha to eliminate her as a witness. The defense argues DNA evidence could be contaminated and questions witness statements, suggesting investigators focused too narrowly on Avila. But the case against him is overwhelming. Witnesses establish the abduction timeline. Neighbors recount seeing Samantha and Sarah playing, hearing screams, and a green car speeding away. Then comes Sarah, now 9, who had witnessed Samantha's abduction at 6. She enters clutching a stuffed animal, the courtroom silent as she begins her testimony. She describes playing with Samantha, the man in the green car, and how he threw her into the car, whispering pleas for help. Gasps fill the room. She identifies Avila in the courtroom as the man who took Samantha. The defense points out minor inconsistencies, like the absence of glasses on the kidnapper, but the trauma she endured and her clear memory demonstrate extraordinary courage. Next, the prosecution presents forensic evidence, which will make the case against Alejandro Avila virtually indisputable. A DNA expert takes the stand, explaining how DNA evidence is collected, analyzed, and calculated for probability. Then she presents the findings. Samantha's DNA is found in multiple locations inside Avila's car, on the door handles, the passenger seatbelt, and the center console. The DNA likely came from tears or mucus. The chance that this DNA belongs to anyone other than Samantha Runnion? 1 in a trillion. 1 trillion. That's 1 million million. To put it in perspective, if every person on Earth were tested, over 8 billion people, you'd need to test everyone more than 100 times before statistically expecting a match. This isn't just strong evidence, it's virtually conclusive. There is no reasonable explanation for Samantha's DNA being in Avila's car other than that she was there. Under Samantha's fingernails, investigators find DNA matching Avila's profile. The odds of this DNA belonging to anyone else? 1 in 600 million. This DNA was left during a struggle. Samantha fought back, scratched him, and that evidence becomes decisive. The defense tries to challenge the DNA, suggesting contamination and questioning collection procedures, but it's not enough. The DNA evidence is rock solid. The prosecution then presents the timeline. ATM withdrawals, cell phone records, and surveillance footage all match Avila's movements. Investigators replicate the drive 1 week after the murder. Timing and route align perfectly. Tire tracks near Samantha's body match Avila's car. Shoe prints match shoes he purchased but no longer possesses. Each piece of evidence alone might be circumstantial, but together they create an overwhelming case. Then comes the computer evidence. A forensic analyst testifies about what he found on Avila's devices: deleted images of child sexual abuse, chat logs from the night before Samantha's abduction discussing locations to harm children. Some jurors visibly recoil. This evidence demonstrates premeditation. Avila wasn't randomly driving by, he was hunting a victim. Next, the jury hears testimony from the girls abused in 2001. Catherine, now 12, recounts being molested at 7 and 8, the threats, and the escalating abuse. Alexis offers similar testimony. Cara, the third girl, details her experience and the threat of violence if she spoke. The defense argues that the 2001 jury acquitted Avila and suggests the girls could be mistaken, but the prosecution reminds the jury that the previous case lacked physical evidence. This time, DNA, timeline, and forensic evidence remove any reasonable doubt. The girls' testimonies now illustrate pattern, motive, and who Avila truly is. Other witnesses reinforce this pattern. Elizabeth, Avila's ex-girlfriend, testifies about his disturbing preferences and behavior. A former roommate recounts finding illicit images on Avila's computer. His sister, Elvira, testifies about Avila saying, while watching Double Jeopardy, that he could harm a child and face no consequences, a statement showing clear motive to silence witnesses. The medical examiner explains Samantha's injuries: mechanical asphyxiation and blunt force trauma combined with sexual assault. The hang glider who found her body testifies, still shaken, describing what he saw. A 911 call is played for the jury. FBI agent Richard Garcia discusses the crime scene, noting the positioning of the body as a deliberate message. "It was almost like a calling card," he says. "I'm here and I'm coming back again." The prosecution rests after presenting DNA, timeline, pattern, motive, and opportunity. The defense faces an almost impossible challenge. They focus on potential evidence collection errors, call experts to suggest contamination, highlight minor discrepancies in Sarah's testimony, and present character witnesses claiming Avila was gentle. His mother, Adelina, testifies tearfully, insisting his innocence and explaining supposed scratches as caused by a baby gate, though cross-examination exposes flaws in her story. The defense offers an alibi, but the prosecution's timeline, ATM withdrawals, cell phone records, and surveillance footage show Avila was driving across Southern California during Samantha's abduction. Avila does not testify, standard when facing overwhelming evidence. During closing arguments, David Brent systematically reviews every piece of evidence, showing how it all connects to prove Avila abducted, assaulted, and killed Samantha to eliminate her as a witness. The defense, Philip Zalewski, argues for doubt, pointing to potential DNA errors and the 2001 acquittal, but the courtroom recognizes it as a weak argument. The jury retires to deliberate. April 27, 2005, nearly 3 years after Samantha's murder. Nearly 2 months into the trial, the jury begins deliberations. Remarkably, for a death penalty case, it takes them less than 9 hours. On April 28, they return with their verdict. The courtroom is packed. Erin Renah is there with her family. The media fills every corner. The community that has followed this case for years is present. The court clerk stands to read the verdicts. Count 1, kidnapping, guilty. Count 2, first-degree murder, guilty. Count 3, lewd and lascivious act on a child under 14, guilty. Count 4, lewd and lascivious act on a child under 14, guilty. Special circumstance, murder during kidnapping, true. Special circumstance, murder during LWD acts, true. Erin gasps as each verdict is read. Then she breaks down in tears. These are not tears of joy. Her daughter is still gone. But they are tears of relief. Finally, justice. Across the jury box, 2 jurors also weep. One rocks slightly in her chair. This case has affected everyone involved. At the defense table, Alejandro Avila sits hunched, staring downward, showing no emotion. His public defender has tears in her eyes. The conviction phase is over, but the trial is not done. This is a capital case. Now begins the penalty phase. The jury must decide, life in prison without parole or death. The defense calls witnesses to testify about Avila's childhood. It is a harrowing story. His father, Rafael, was abusive and arrested for child abuse when Alejandro was 14. Rafael later pleaded guilty to manslaughter after fatally shooting a neighbor. Avila's brother, Juan, was murdered in Mexico by gang members. Defense witnesses testify that Alejandro was regularly beaten as a child, possibly sexually abused by an uncle, and grew up in poverty, violence, and dysfunction. Dr. Francisco Gomez, a psychiatrist, discusses multigenerational trauma, explaining how abuse can create abusers. The defense argues that while Avila's crime was terrible, it was impulsive, shaped by a damaged psyche, and that life without parole is sufficient. The prosecution rebuts with Dr. Park Dietz, a leading forensic psychiatrist. He testifies that trauma does not remove moral responsibility. Pedophiles have free will, and Avila chose to act on his desires. Prosecutor David Brent reminds the jury of the evidence of premeditation, the computer activity, the deliberate abduction, the suffering Samantha endured, and how her body was left as a message. Brent argues the only way to ensure Avila never harms another child is the ultimate penalty. After 7 hours of deliberation, on May 16, 2005, the jury returns a unanimous recommendation, death. Jury foreman Terry Dancy later tells reporters, "If ever there was a crime that deserves the death penalty, it was this one." On July 22, 2005, exactly 3 years and 1 week after Samantha's murder, Judge William R. Froberg imposes sentence. Before he speaks, Erin Renah delivers her victim impact statement. She looks directly at Avila, her voice steady but filled with grief. "Samantha fought. I know she looked at you with those amazing brown eyes and you still wanted to kill her. I don't understand it. I never will." She speaks of the milestones lost, birthdays that will never happen, grandchildren that will never exist. Even in her grief, she thinks of other children, of prevention, of legacy. Judge Froberg reviews the aggravating and mitigating factors, considers the jury's recommendation, and sentences Alejandro Avila to death. He addresses the defense's claims about Avila's childhood. "I view that testimony with a great deal of skepticism, noting none of these traumas were mentioned before this trial." Avila remains silent, emotionless, and is led to begin his life on death row. 9 of the 12 jurors return to witness the sentencing, offering support to Samantha's family. Outside the courthouse, Sheriff Michael Corona speaks emotionally, thanking Aaron for her grace. Aaron expresses the pain of the 2001 acquittal. "I blame every juror who let him go." Catherine's mother, Elizabeth Veglin, affirms that justice has finally been served for her daughter, her niece, and Samantha. Though the conviction and death sentence bring legal closure, the families still carry their grief. Samantha is gone. Catherine, Alexis, and Cara live with the trauma. Yet justice has been delivered. Avila is transported to San Quentin State Prison to await execution. In America, a death sentence does not mean immediate execution. Years, sometimes decades, of appeals follow. Avila immediately files a direct appeal to the California Supreme Court, challenging pretrial publicity, the admission of testimony from the 2001 acquittal, DNA evidence, and other technical issues. Case number S135855, People v. Avila, will take 9 years for the Supreme Court to rule. During this time, Avila lives on death row in a tiny cell, with limited contact and minimal exercise. Meanwhile, Erin Renah begins channeling her grief into something extraordinary, building a legacy from tragedy. The Joyful Child Foundation, founded in September 2002, is growing. Programs are expanding, reaching children across California and beyond. Its flagship initiative, Be Brave, Be Safe, is a comprehensive curriculum for children from pre-K through high school. It teaches kids how to recognize danger, trust their instincts, say no, and if necessary, resist and escape. The program is rooted in research on how predators target victims, equipping children with practical tools to protect themselves. Erin partners with schools, law enforcement, and community organizations. She trains teachers and officers to deliver the program. Over time, Be Brave, Be Safe spreads throughout California and eventually to other states. But protecting children isn't just about teaching kids, it's also about educating parents. Erin develops programs to teach parents how to recognize risks, spot warning signs, and talk to their children about safety without causing fear. She becomes a sought-after speaker, traveling to Sacramento to advocate for stronger child protection laws. Over the years, numerous pieces of legislation pass in California: stricter sex offender registration, expanded DNA collection, and mandatory child safety education in schools. Erin plays a role in nearly all of them. She also connects with other families who have suffered, other advocates working to prevent child abuse. One crucial connection is with Yana Sepich. Yana's daughter Katie, a 22-year-old college student in New Mexico, was raped and murdered in 2003. Her body was found in a landfill, and the case went cold. DNA evidence existed, but there was no match. 3 years later, a man was arrested on an unrelated burglary charge. His DNA matched Katie's murder. But in the 3 years between the murder and his arrest, he had committed other crimes. If DNA had been collected at the time of his initial arrests, Katie's killer might have been caught sooner. Yana became a leading advocate for what became known as Katie's Law, requiring DNA collection from individuals arrested for serious felonies, not just convicted. The logic was simple: many violent criminals commit multiple offenses before conviction. Collecting DNA earlier could solve cold cases faster and prevent future crimes. The law faced controversy, with critics citing civil liberties concerns, but Yana persisted, and Erin Renah became her key ally. Two mothers, united by tragedy, pushed for stronger protections. Katie's Law eventually passed in New Mexico and spread to over 25 states. In 2006, Erin attended a White House ceremony as President George W. Bush signed the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act into law. The act was comprehensive, strengthening sex offender registration, creating a national registry, increasing penalties for crimes against children, and specifically naming Samantha Runnion in Section 102, Paragraph 17. Erin stood alongside John Walsh, Mark Kloss, Mark Lunsford, Patty Wetling, Ed Smart, and other advocates, a moment of recognition for families turning grief into action. Samantha's legacy was now enshrined in federal law. She was no longer just a victim, she became a catalyst for change. California's Amber Alert system, expanded because of her case, proved its worth. Between 2002 and 2012, California issued 47 Amber Alerts under the new system, each resulting in a child safely returned. That's 47 lives saved, made possible because Samantha's tragedy sparked action. Aaron often says, hundreds and hundreds of children have been protected. Meanwhile, Alejandro Avila remained on death row, filing appeals. On June 30, 2014, 9 years after his conviction, the California Supreme Court issued a unanimous ruling. Justice Ming-Chin wrote the opinion. The court rejected every argument Avila's attorneys raised. Venue change. The jury selection process ensured impartiality despite media coverage. Admission of evidence from the 2001 case, properly admitted under California Evidence Code Section 1108 to show pattern, motive, and propensity.DNA evidence, properly collected and analyzed. Death penalty appropriateness, valid under California law, given the murder occurred during a kidnapping and sexual assault of a child. The California Supreme Court affirmed both the conviction and the death sentence. Case S135855, People v. Avila. Avila's attorneys petitioned for rehearing, denied. They then asked the U.S. Supreme Court to review the case. In 2015, the Supreme Court declined to hear it. His direct appeals were exhausted. Avila's conviction and death sentence were final, but he still had options. He could file a state habeas corpus petition, a separate legal process to raise claims not addressed in the direct appeal, ineffective assistance of counsel, newly discovered evidence, or constitutional violations. Meanwhile, Aaron continued building her legacy, turning personal tragedy into a movement that protected countless children. On February 19, 2015, Alejandro Avila's state habeas corpus petition was filed, but as of December 2025, no ruling has been issued. This is common in California death penalty cases, where appeals can take decades. Inmates often spend 20, 30, even 40 years on death row before execution, if it ever happens at all. A critical development changed the reality for Avila. On March 13, 2019, California Governor Gavin Newsom issued Executive Order N-09-19, placing a moratorium on all executions in the state. Every condemned inmate received a reprieve, and no executions would be carried out while the order remained in effect. The decision sparked debate. Supporters argued the death penalty was costly, ineffective, morally wrong, and prone to racial bias. Opponents insisted some crimes deserved the ultimate punishment and that victims' families had a right to see justice carried out. Regardless of the debate, the practical effect was clear. Alejandro Avila would almost certainly never be executed. California had not executed anyone since January 17, 2006, when Clarence Ray Allen died by lethal injection at age 76 after more than 20 years on death row. Legal challenges, procedural delays, and now the moratorium made executions effectively impossible. By December 2025, California's death row population had fallen to around 580 inmates, the lowest in 25 years, due to deaths, suicides, sentence reductions, and fewer new death sentences. In May 2024, California completed the relocation of all death row inmates from San Quentin State Prison. For decades, San Quentin housed the state's death row and execution chamber. The facility was rebranded as the San Quentin Rehabilitation Center, shifting the focus from punishment to rehabilitation. All 512 condemned inmates, including Avila, were transferred to other maximum security facilities. His exact location is not publicly disclosed. While Avila still carries a death sentence, in reality he is serving life in prison with no realistic chance of execution. Governor Newsom's moratorium could theoretically be reversed by a future governor, but all declared Democratic candidates for the 2026 election have expressed support for maintaining it. California's political landscape makes it likely that Avila will die in prison of natural causes, spending the rest of his life incarcerated but never executed. Aaron Runnion has spoken publicly about this reality. "I will never forgive what he did to my daughter," she says. But she adds that the only forgiveness that matters is Samantha's, not hers. She reflects on sitting in court, hearing about Avila's abusive childhood, being tied up and beaten as a child, and growing up in a violent, dysfunctional home. "It's no excuse for what he did," she says, but it's a fact. We need to prevent crimes against all children. Erin's approach focuses on breaking the cycle of violence. She understands that people who harm children were often abused themselves. This doesn't justify their actions, but it highlights a path forward: prevention. I tell his story for a reason, she says. People think of child abusers and murderers as monsters. But we need to understand what creates these monsters. It's the cycle of violence. Her work remains centered on education, prevention, and protecting children before they become victims. The Joyful Child Foundation continued its mission through the 2010s and into the 2020s. The organization hosts annual fundraisers, trains educators and law enforcement officers, and provides free programs to schools and communities. In 2013, the foundation launched the Be Brave, Be Safe empowerment programs, research-based curricula tailored for different age groups. For young children, the focus is body autonomy, teaching them their body belongs to them, they have the right to say no, and they should tell a trusted adult if something feels wrong. For older children, the programs cover manipulation, grooming tactics, and the difference between secrets and surprises. Teenagers learn about online safety, dating violence, and consent. The programs are designed to empower without frightening, giving children practical tools to stay safe. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020, the foundation quickly adapted, moving classes online. This expanded its reach nationally and internationally, allowing Erin's team to train far more people than ever before. On October 26, 2024, the foundation held its annual gala, celebrating the children kept safe and the progress made over 22 years. Thousands of educators and officers have been trained, hundreds of thousands of children reached, and countless potential tragedies prevented. This is Samantha's legacy. Every child who learns to trust their instincts, recognize danger, and seek help carries a piece of her story forward. Erin also works on a memoir titled Be Brave, Losing Samantha, Protecting Joy. The book tells Samantha's story and serves as a guide for parents and advocates, ensuring her life continues to inspire change and protect children everywhere. As of December 2025, Erin Runnion's memoir hasn't been published yet, but she speaks often about the project. It's her way of making sure Samantha's story continues to reach people, that the lessons learned continue to protect children. Erin also hosts a podcast called Let's Talk Joy, focused on child protection, trauma recovery, and advocacy. She interviews advocates, survivors, law enforcement officials, and child development experts. Erin remains an in-demand speaker. Schools, universities, law enforcement conferences, and community organizations invite her to share Samantha's story. She talks about what happened, what could have prevented it, and what can prevent similar tragedies in the future. She has turned her grief into action, her pain into purpose, and her loss into a legacy. She has connected with victim advocates across the country and the world. One particularly poignant connection is with Megan Kanka's family. Megan was a 7-year-old girl in New Jersey who was raped and murdered by a neighbor in 1994. Megan's death led to Megan's Law, requiring sex offender registration and community notification, which eventually spread nationwide and became part of federal law. Erin has met with Megan's parents, sharing a bond forged through tragedy. Both women have seen their children's deaths spark meaningful change. Another connection is with Amber Hagerman's family. Amber, a 9-year-old abducted and murdered in Texas in 1996, inspired the Amber Alert system. California adopted Amber Alerts in part because of Samantha's case. 2 girls, connected by tragedy, whose legacies continue to save lives. Every Amber Alert that leads to a safe recovery is partly because of Amber Hagerman and partly because of Samantha Runnion. Their deaths created systems that protect other children. On the 10th anniversary of Samantha's death in July 2012, PBS aired a documentary segment for its Real Orange series titled Journey Through a Decade of Pain, Bravery, and Hope. It featured interviews with Erin, law enforcement officials, and people touched by the Joyful Child Foundation. The segment highlighted the changes since Samantha's death, the Amber Alert system, new DNA laws, safety education programs, and increased awareness, but also acknowledged that child sexual abuse remains tragically common and predators still exist. On the 20th anniversary, in July 2022, Fox 11 Los Angeles conducted an exclusive interview with Erin. Journalist Laura Diaz accompanied her to the spot where Samantha's body was found, now renamed South Main Divide. Erin spoke about the day her daughter was discovered, the long years that followed, and the children protected because of her advocacy. "I like to think it wasn't for nothing," she said. The pain was still visible, but so was her purpose and determination to make Samantha's death meaningful. Throughout all of this, one question remains. Could Samantha's death have been prevented? The answer is yes, in many ways. If the 2001 jury had convicted Alejandro Avila, he would have been in prison on July 15, 2002. If Catherine and Alexis had been believed, if the system had protected them, Samantha could have lived. If the Amber Alert system had been in place, if someone had noticed the green Thunderbird and reported it, maybe Samantha would have been rescued. If more adults had been watching, if the complex had better security, so many ifs. But none of the ifs changed the fact that Samantha was abducted and murdered. Alejandro Avila is the only person responsible. The system failed, the 2001 jury failed, but one person made the choice to harm a child. Now 50 years old, Avila sits in a California prison, likely to remain there for life. His death sentence hangs over him, but it probably will never be carried out. He has never admitted guilt, expressed remorse, or apologized. In prison records, he is simply listed as condemned inmate Alejandro Avila. Received July 25, 2005. Status active. That is all. Meanwhile, Samantha's memory lives on, in the Joyful Child Foundation, in California's Amber Alert system, in Katie's Law, in the Adam Walsh Act, and in the hundreds of children protected because of programs and laws inspired by her. Nearly 23 years have passed since Samantha Runnion was murdered. An entire generation of children has grown up in a world shaped by what happened to her, even if most don't know her name. When Amber Alerts flash on California freeways, or children participate in safety programs at school, the impact of Samantha's life, and her death, is still protecting others. Samantha's case changed child safety in concrete ways. The California Amber Alert system, safety education programs, and laws requiring DNA collection at arrest are just some examples. These changes matter. They continue to save lives every day. On August 24, 2002, Governor Davis signed Assembly Bill 415 into law, making California the 14th state to adopt the Amber Alert system. California's implementation was ambitious. The state invested heavily in the technology needed to display alerts on electronic freeway signs across more than 50,000 lane miles of highways. With nearly 39 million residents, and Greater Los Angeles alone bigger than most states, making the system work required coordination between the California Highway Patrol, local law enforcement agencies in all 58 counties, the Department of Transportation, broadcasters, and eventually cell phone providers. Samantha Runnion's case provided the urgency, public support, and political will to make it happen quickly. California's Amber Alert system has clear criteria. The abducted person must be under 18. Law enforcement must believe the abduction poses a credible threat of serious harm or death. There must be enough information about the child, the abductor, or the vehicle to make the alert useful. These rules prevent overuse, which could lead to alert fatigue and make the public stop paying attention. By December 2025, California had activated the Amber Alert hundreds of times. The success rate is remarkable. Sometimes the alert leads directly to a rescue. A driver spots the vehicle, calls the police, and the child is recovered. Sometimes the alert influences the abductor, who abandons the child, knowing law enforcement is closing in. Even when the alert doesn't immediately lead to recovery, it generates tips, witnesses come forward, or surveillance footage is found. Not every alert works perfectly. Sometimes the child is already gone, or the information is wrong, but overall, the system saves lives. California's Amber Alert, implemented because of Samantha Runnion, is one of the most effective in the nation. Other states watched closely, and California's success encouraged them to invest in their own systems. The system also went digital. Originally, alerts appeared on freeway signs and broadcast on radio and TV. Today, Amber Alerts can be pushed directly to millions of cell phones in a targeted area. A driver in Southern California might get a sudden alert on their phone. A child has been abducted. Here's what they look like. Here's the vehicle. Call 911 if you see anything. This mass notification, impossible in 2002, is now routine and highly effective. Every child recovered through an Amber Alert in California is part of Samantha's legacy. Hundreds of children, hundreds of families, spared the tragedy her family endured. Samantha's legacy is also deeply personal through the Joyful Child Foundation and the Be Brave programs. These programs are a powerful force in child protection education. What sets them apart is research-based curriculum design and a focus on empowerment rather than fear. Many child safety programs scare children, teaching that danger is everywhere and adults cannot be trusted. The Be Brave programs take a different approach. They give children specific skills while keeping them safe and confident. For young children, ages 4 to 7, the focus is body autonomy. They learn that their bodies belong to them, that they can say no to unwanted touch, even from family or friends, and the difference between good secrets and bad secrets. Lessons are taught through stories, songs, role-playing, and age-appropriate activities, so children learn without fear. For children 8 to 11, the programs become more sophisticated. They teach about manipulation, grooming tactics, recognizing inappropriate behavior, and trusting instincts. Children learn it's okay to say no, tell an adult, or make a scene if necessary. They are reminded repeatedly, if an adult hurts a child, it is never the child's fault. For teenagers, ages 12 to 18, the curriculum expands to online safety, dating violence, and consent. They learn to recognize red flags, understand grooming tactics online, and navigate relationships safely. The programs also train adults. Parents learn to talk to children about safety without creating fear. Teachers learn to recognize abuse signs. Law enforcement officers are trained in trauma-informed approaches when interviewing child victims. The foundation doesn't just drop materials and leave, they provide ongoing support, follow-ups, and training. By December 2025, the Joyful Child Foundation had trained thousands of educators and law enforcement officers. The Be Brave programs are implemented across California and multiple other states. Measuring how many children have been protected is difficult. Often the prevention is invisible. But thousands of children have likely avoided abuse or abduction, and lives have been saved. Samantha's legacy lives on in every child who learns to trust their instincts, recognize danger, and stay safe. This is Samantha's legacy in action. Another major impact comes from legislative changes. Erin Runnion has spent years advocating for child protection laws at both the state and federal level. We've already discussed the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act of 2006, which specifically names Samantha in its findings. That law created a national sex offender registry, strengthened registration requirements, and increased penalties for crimes against children. We've also covered Katie's Law, which requires DNA collection from individuals arrested for serious felonies. Erin was a key supporter as the law spread from New Mexico to over 25 states. But there are many other laws she has influenced. California has passed numerous bills since 2002 to make children safer. Erin has testified in support of laws on mandatory reporting of suspected abuse, background checks for anyone working with children, and statutes of limitations for child sexual abuse cases. Each law strengthens the safety net, removing vulnerabilities in the system. Erin has also worked on victim rights legislation. These laws ensure victims and their families have a voice in criminal proceedings, can submit impact statements, and are notified about parole hearings. While these laws don't prevent crimes, they guarantee that victims are treated with dignity and respect when the unthinkable occurs. Cultural change is another vital part of Samantha's legacy. Before her case, many people believed stranger abductions only happened somewhere else. Samantha's abduction shattered that illusion. It happened in broad daylight, in a safe, middle-class community, to a child whose parents were careful and protective. The message was clear: no community is immune. This awareness changed parenting, community design, and school security. In 2002, It was common for young children to play outside unsupervised. Today, that's far less common. Sociologists debate whether this is overprotection or necessary caution, but Samantha's case was a catalyst. Law enforcement practices also changed. The rapid, massive response to Samantha's disappearance, FBI agents arriving within hours, set a template for future child abductions. Today, every missing child case triggers immediate, coordinated, 24-hour investigations. Resources are deployed instantly. In earlier decades, reports of missing children were sometimes treated as runaways. Cases like Samantha's, Elizabeth Smart's, and J.C. Dugard's changed that. Every child is now treated as an immediate danger from the first moment. Samantha's case also transformed how child testimony is treated in court. In 2001, the jury acquitted Alejandro Ayla, doubting Catherine and Alexis because of inconsistencies in their statements. Today, there is a better understanding of how trauma affects memory. Law enforcement officers and prosecutors receive specialized training on interviewing child witnesses. Forensic interview centers provide safe spaces for children to tell their story once, minimizing repeated trauma. Courts now recognize that children may not remember exact dates or sequences but can provide consistent core details. The case also highlights prevention. Alejandro Ayla's conviction and death sentence provided justice, but it couldn't bring Samantha back or undo the trauma endured by her friends and family. True success comes from preventing crimes before they happen. That is the focus of the Joyful Child Foundation: education, awareness, early intervention, and breaking the cycle of violence. Aaron often says, "Hurt people hurt people." Abused children sometimes become abusers themselves. Breaking that cycle requires effective child protective services, mental health support, and addressing factors like poverty, substance abuse, and domestic violence. Samantha's story also forces us to confront difficult questions about justice. Alejandro Ayla is sentenced to death but is unlikely to be executed. Some argue that spending life in prison, stripped of freedom, is sufficient punishment. Others feel it's not enough for the murder of a 5-year-old. Still others reject the death penalty entirely. Erin Renah supported the death penalty at trial, but her focus has always been on protecting future children rather than debating Ayla's fate. Derek, Samantha's father, has grieved more privately but expressed support for the death penalty at the time. There is also the concern of exploitation. True crime content can risk sensationalizing tragedy. Erin has been deliberate in sharing Samantha's story responsibly, participating in documentaries, news specials, and interviews with the goal of education and prevention. Her mission is not sensationalism, it's to teach parents to be vigilant, to show how quickly tragedy can strike, and to inspire action to protect children. If this documentary raises awareness, encourages vigilance, or motivates support for organizations like the Joyful Child Foundation, then telling Samantha's story has value. There are concrete steps everyone can take to help protect children. Learn the warning signs of abuse: unexplained bruises, sudden behavior changes, regression, inappropriate sexual knowledge, fear of certain people or places. If abuse is suspected, report it immediately. In the United States, you can contact the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-422-4453. The hotline is available 24/7 and confidential. Mandatory reporters, teachers, doctors, counselors, and others working with children are legally required to report suspected abuse. But even if you're not required, it's critical to speak up. Support organizations dedicated to child protection. Advocate for prevention programs in schools and communities. Samantha's story shows that vigilance, education, and action can prevent tragedies before they occur. The Joyful Child Foundation is one of many organizations dedicated to protecting children. National groups like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, local nonprofits supporting abused children, they all need help. Funding, volunteers, and advocates are essential. If you can donate money, do it. If you can donate time, do that. If you can spread awareness, that matters too. Talk to the children in your life about safety. Use language they can understand. Don't terrify them, but teach them that their body belongs to them, that they have the right to say no to unwanted touch, and that they should tell a trusted adult if someone makes them uncomfortable. Teach them the difference between good secrets and bad secrets. Teach them that if an adult does something wrong, it's never the child's fault. Be alert as an adult. In parks, schools, or public spaces, notice what's happening. If a child seems distressed, or if an adult is behaving inappropriately, trust your instincts. Intervene if you can, or call authorities. Don't assume someone else will act. The bystander effect is real. Support evidence-based policies, DNA collection at arrest, fully funded child protective services, accessible mental health treatment, programs addressing poverty and family dysfunction. These aren't glamorous issues, but they prevent abuse before it happens. As we close this documentary, let's return to where we began, the 6-year-old girl in the courtroom, Sarah N., who bravely testified after witnessing her best friend's abduction. Her courage was crucial. Without her, Alejandro Avila might never have been convicted. Sarah is an adult now, carrying memories of that day, and we can only hope she has found some peace and healing. Samantha was just 5 years old. She loved Disney movies, superheroes, sunflowers, and life itself. She was 11 days away from her 6th birthday when she was taken. Her death was tragic, but her legacy is real. The California Amber Alert System, the Be Brave programs teaching children to protect themselves, legislative changes strengthening protections, cultural shifts in parenting and child safety, these are direct results of Samantha's life and the work her mother, Erin Runnion, has done. Hundreds of children have been saved because of what Samantha inspired. Her life mattered. Her story continues. Erin carries the pain of losing her daughter every day. It doesn't fade. But she transformed that grief into action. She chose to honor Samantha by protecting other children, not by retreating from the world. The Joyful Child Foundation ensures Samantha's presence lives on. Every child who learns to trust their instincts, every teacher trained, every parent educated, these are all part of Samantha's legacy. Over the past 23 years, Erin has testified before legislatures, trained thousands of educators and law enforcement officers, reached hundreds of thousands of children, and advocated for laws at state and federal levels. She has told Samantha's story hundreds of times, reliving that day repeatedly, because each telling might save a child, might inspire a parent, might protect another family. The foundation continues to evolve. Today, programs address online safety, privacy, cyberbullying, digital consent, and healthy relationships. When COVID-19 forced schools to close, the foundation quickly adapted to online training, expanding its reach across the country and internationally. Teachers in rural areas now access the same training as those in Los Angeles. The foundation's annual Joyful Gala celebrates progress, honors the children protected, and raises awareness for continued advocacy. In remembering Samantha, we mourn what she never got to experience, the birthdays, milestones, and life she deserved, but we also recognize what her life became, a force for protection and change. Samantha's story has saved lives. It has created safer communities. It has inspired action. On the 20th anniversary of her death, Erin said, Samantha was real. She was funny, smart, and she loved surprises and her hero, Hercules. She mattered. And you can turn grief into action. You can take the worst thing that ever happened and use it to help others. That doesn't make it okay, but it means she didn't die for nothing. Samantha's legacy isn't in the tragedy itself. It's in the children protected, the laws passed, the programs created, and the awareness raised. The California Amber Alert System has saved hundreds of children. The Joyful Child Foundation's Be Brave programs have reached hundreds of thousands. The Adam Walsh Act and Katie's Law continue to strengthen child protection nationwide. Her story reminds us that prevention matters more than punishment, that vigilance saves lives, and that grief can be transformed into purpose. As viewers, you are now part of that legacy. Talk to children, notice warning signs, support organizations that protect kids, and advocate for stronger policies. Action ensures Samantha's story continues. Return one final time to the courtyard at the Smoke Tree Condominium Complex in Stanton, California. Children play there today, unaware of what happened in 2002. The memorial is gone, but the memory remains. Longtime residents remember the little girl who once played there, the community that rallied in grief and determination. Across Southern California, freeway signs still flash amber alerts. Children still learn to protect themselves. Laws continue to evolve. All of this exists because of a 5-year-old girl who loved superheroes and sunflowers. Samantha Brie Runnion, born July 26, 1996, died July 16, 2002, was a daughter, a friend, a child, a catalyst, a legacy. Her story is tragic, but it is powerful. It reminds us that even in darkness, we can act, protect, and create meaning. Because of Erin Runnion, Samantha's story continues, not just as a victim, but as a force for change, a call to action, and a symbol of hope. Samantha's life mattered. Her story continues to save others. She is remembered. She is honored. She is loved.